It all began with something so trivial, so insignificant that I can hardly believe it set everything in motion. I was in the living room, folding laundry, when I heard Oliver call out from the hallway. "Lena, can you help me with this?" I turned to see him standing by the stairs. Fumbling with his belt, his khaki shorts hung awkwardly around his hips, and the leather strap of the belt was caught in the buckle. "It's stuck," he said, walking toward me. "Let me see," I replied, setting the towels aside as he stepped closer. I focused on the buckle, trying to free it. "How did you manage this?" I asked, half laughing, half concentrating. "No idea, it's cursed." He joked, his tone light. Finally, I managed to untangle it. But in the process, his shorts slipped to the floor. Time seemed to pause. I glanced down instinctively, immediately regretted it, and turned my gaze away. Oliver's face turned crimson as he froze, his hands hovering mid-air. "Sorry," he mumbled hastily, pulling his shorts back up. "It's fine, accidents happen," I said quickly, stepping back. "Thanks for the help," he muttered before bolting up the stairs, leaving me alone with a racing heart. It was just a fleeting, awkward moment. But something shifted between us. The air felt charged like a static current. Neither of us acknowledged, yet both felt deeply. We didn't speak of it, but it lingered. Invisible yet undeniable. My marriage to David wasn't a storybook romance. It wasn't bad either, just comfortable, routine, predictable. We had both been through divorces, finding solace in each other's stability rather than passion. David was a man of habits, devoted to his golf games, work dinners and fishing trips. I filled my days with gardening, volunteering and managing the house. And then Oliver moved in. David, son from his first marriage. Oliver had always been polite but distant. During the early years of our marriage, I only saw him on holidays. Back then he was a shy college student who avoided eye contact and mumbled his responses. But when he showed up at our doorstep 6 years later, he was no longer the awkward teenager I remembered. Oliver had just graduated with a fine arts degree, struggling to land a stable job. David, skeptical of his career choice, offered him a place to stay while he sorted things out. I didn't have much of a say in the matter, but I welcomed the change. The house was spacious, and I thought his presence might bring some life to the quiet routine. I hadn't anticipated how much life he'd bring. Oliver had a natural charisma, a disarming smile, and a dry wit that lit up the house in ways David never did. It started with small moments. One morning, as I tended the garden, Oliver appeared in the doorway, barefoot and holding a cup of coffee. "Morning," he said, his voice groggy but warm. "You're up early?" I replied. Pruning a rose bush, he shrugged. "Couldn't sleep, figured I'd come admire your handiwork." I laughed. "Don't let David hear that. He's convinced the garden takes care of itself." "David doesn't notice much, does he?" Oliver said casually, though there was an edge to his tone. His words caught me off guard, but I let them pass without comment. Over the weeks, our conversations grew more frequent, more natural. He'd linger in the kitchen while I cooked, recounting college anecdotes or seeking advice on job applications. One afternoon, I found him on the couch, sketching in a notebook. "What are you working on?" I asked. Nodding toward the pad, he hesitated before handing it over. The pages were filled with stunning pencil sketches. Portraits, landscapes, and abstract pieces that seemed to pulse with life. "These are incredible," I said. "Genuinely amazed, thanks." "It's just something I do to pass the time," he replied softly. "You should share these with someone, a gallery and art dealer. You have real talent, Oliver." He smiled faintly, his eyes meeting mine. "You're the first person who's ever said that." His words lingered with me long after the conversation ended. There was a vulnerability in his tone that stirred something deep inside me, something I couldn't quite name. And then came the belt incident. 4 days afterward, the air between us felt charged with unspoken tension. I avoided being alone with him, but in a house that large yet eerily quiet, it was impossible. Our paths crossed constantly. One evening, as I stood at the sink washing dishes, Oliver walked into the kitchen. His hair was damp from a shower, and he carried himself with a tentative energy. "Lena," he said softly. I turned, my chest tightening at the sound of my name. "Yes. I wanted to apologize for the other day." That was awkward. "It's fine," I said quickly, turning back to the sink. "Let's just forget about it." "I don't think I can," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I froze, my hands submerged in soapy water. His words hung heavy in the air, loaded with a meaning I wasn't ready to confront. Slowly, I turned to face him. "Oliver, we can't," I began, my voice faltering. "I know," he interrupted, stepping closer. "I just don't want you to think it didn't mean anything to me." The intensity in his eyes left me breathless. For a moment, the space between us seemed to disappear, and the world narrowed to just the two of us. Then David's voice boomed from the front door, shattering the moment. "I'll be right there," I called out, turning away from Oliver. My hands trembled as I dried them on a towel. The days that followed were a whirlwind of confusion and self-decrimination. I buried myself in tasks, trying to suppress the knowing guilt and the strange exhilaration that refused to fade. But it wasn't enough. The truth was, I felt seen, noticed in a way I hadn't in years. And then everything changed again. One afternoon, while David was away on a fishing trip, Oliver found me in the attic. I was sorting through old boxes trying to distract myself from the storm inside me. "Need a hand?" he asked, climbing the creaky stairs. "No, I'm fine," I replied, not looking up. But he didn't leave instead. He crouched beside me, pulling a dusty photo album from a box. "Who's this?" he asked, pointed to a faded photo of a young couple at the beach. "That's me and my first husband," I said quietly. "You look happy," he observed, his tone neutral. I admit it. But life has a way of changing things. He nodded, his gaze lingering on the photo before turning to me. "Do you regret it, how things turned out?" I hesitated, the question cutting deeper than I expected sometimes. But regret doesn't change anything. Oliver reached for my hand, his touch warm and grounding. "Maybe not. But choices still matter." The weight of his words hung between us, and for the first time, I felt the full gravity of the situation. This wasn't just a fleeting infatuation or a misguided impulse. It was a crossroad. I pulled my hand away gently, rising to my feet. "I think you should go, Oliver." He stood too, his expression conflicted. "Lena, please," I insisted. My voice firm. "We can't keep doing this." He nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping as he turned to leave. I watched him descend the stairs, a pang of loss striking me in the chest. But I knew it was the right thing to do. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding the walls between us. Oliver found a job in another city, and the day he left, I felt both relief and an aching emptiness. As his car disappeared down the driveway, I realized something important. It wasn't just about him, it was about me. About the parts of myself I'd neglected, the dreams I'd buried, and the life I still had ahead of me. Oliver had been a spark, a catalyst. But the fire was mine to tend. David never noticed the change, too absorbed in his routines to see the shifts beneath the surface. But I knew, and for the first time in years, I felt alive. Not because of someone else, but because I found the courage to confront my own truths. And that was the real beginning.